this? Man, are you serious? Look at these lines! The Vancouver Canucks are playing the Washington Capitals today. And guess who's making his debut? It is none other than D. Petey. Elias Pettersson, I think is how you say his name. Not Elias, the same guy that we've been talking about in all these trade videos over the past few weeks. Noted Canucks superstar Elias Pettersson, but I think it's Elias. We'll have to correct that as the day goes on. But tonight, D. Petey makes his debut against Washington and Alex Ovechkin. Guess what? D. Petey was born after Ovechkin made his debut in the NHL. That was talked about by Rick Dhaliwal earlier today. But look at this! Rick Tocchet, what are you doing? First line center tonight, Pius Suter. Second line center, JT Miller. Third line center, Elias Pettersson? What the hell? Petey's a third line player today? We're going to be getting into this. We'll talk about some of the reaction. We'll talk about some of the criticism tossed Pettersson's way, some of the criticism that's tossed the other way. Oh no, it's not Pettersson's fault, it's other people's faults. We'll also talk about the trade updates because we have a big update with that, what the Carolina Hurricanes are thinking about in regards to Elias Pettersson. But wow, heading into today's game, it looks like we are having three Suns in the bottom six. You got Pettersson, you've got Karlsson, you've got Sasson. And this line right here, Swedish line, Höglander, Pettersson, Karlsson, who knows how well they're going to be able to produce. Let's go out there and read some of the replies. I mean, people are going out there and talking about 3C. EP40 at 3C, what is happening here? The Canucks stars don't seem to care and they are not engaged. When they're healthy, I want to see them try Petey Miller Besser. Yeah, 649 line, except have Miller as the center instead. I'm not the biggest Tocchet fan, but for those questioning the line changes today, it took so long for Alain Vigneault to finally put undrafted fourth liner Burrows with the Sedins, and then magic finally happened. Hopefully, something good comes with the new lines tonight. And that is true. I don't want to go out there and say that the AV Burrows-Sedin situation is going to happen one more time with the Brusque Suter Garland, but the way this team is being put together, man, it's interesting. Especially when you dive into some of the quote tweets here. People are responding to this in a very positive way, of course. Can Tocchet honestly talk about Pettersson needing to do more when he plays him with two wingers with a combined 3 goals and 9 points in 46 games this season? Now, what exactly is that Pettersson needing to do more angle? Well, this is what's talked about. This is what Randeep Chanda said earlier this morning that caused a bit of a stir. Rick Tocchet has often mentioned that his players need to hold on to the puck and meet pressure with pressure. No better example of how that's not being done than Elias Pettersson. Randeep then tweets out the controlled entries per game. Pettersson was 43rd in the NHL last season with 4.89 controlled entries per game. This season he is at 3.98, which is good enough to rank 94th. So Randeep's main argument here is that Pettersson does not control entry per game as much as he had last year, and that by proxy is not living up to what Tocchet said, where his players need to hold on to pucks and meet pressure with pressure. Let's look at some of the responses. Sap went out there and replied, hey, Pettersson's rush attempts per 60 went from .35 from the start of 22-23 until the 2024 All-Star game to .18 from after the All-Star break until now. That is literally cut in half. Pettersson's primary line mates last season all saw drastic drops in rush attempts per 60 after the All-Star break until either they were traded or, if they're still here, until now. Ilya Mikheyev went from .51 to 0, Sam Lafferty went from .77 to .37, Höglander went from .53 to .21, Kuzmenko went from .56 to none because he got traded. Could it be that Rick Tocchet has completely misjudged what makes Pettersson successful as a player and made every offensive player on our team terrified of turning the puck over, so they just dump instead of trying to go through any form of resistance at the opposing blue line in a league that is increasingly more reliant on rush offense? Or did the 26-year-old point-per-game Selke-level center that had a 129-game stretch with 166 points suddenly fall off like no other player with his statistical profile has in hockey history? What a reply by Sap. Essentially saying that the way Rick Tocchet coaches this team and the standards, what repercussions there are for turnovers, etc., have caused these guys to go through a little existential crisis with how they play and how they try to enter the zone, how they either dump it in instead of controlling it and facing the pressure. All these guys had significant decreases in rush attempt per 60 numbers after the All-Star break last year, which was the main drop-off point for Elias Pettersson's game as well. I do find this point interesting. Has Tocchet completely misjudged what makes Pettersson successful as a player? And I wanted to go over some of the replies here, too. Look at Jason Bruff. I think you have to allow for both of these things to play a role. Either Tocchet misjudging Pettersson and Pettersson falling off a little bit, too. Pettersson on the power play is a huge tell for me. He barely participates some nights. Did Tocchet ruin him there, too? Have you seen our power play? When was the last time this team worked a play into the bumper for a goal? When was the last time we saw a cross-seam pass or a tic-tac-toe? The Canucks were 25% on the power play during a 129-game stretch where Pettersson was 7th in the NHL in points. Ever since we got rid of Horvat and then Kuzmenko, the bumper threats, the power play has become increasingly more perimeter, reliant on point shots and rebounds, and is rocking a 20.4%. Oh, and even with all that said, Pettersson is still second on the team in power play goals since 2024's All-Star break and second since the beginning of last year. So, the argument that Pettersson doesn't look as dangerous on the power play is worth pointing out, yes, but it's also worth pointing out that the Canucks power play is just not as good as it was, and some of the personnel, especially the guys in the bumper, Horvat and Kuzmenko, being removed, have significantly decreased the effectiveness of this power play. It's a lot more perimeter, it's a lot more point shot heavy, rather than actually getting the puck into those dirty areas, putting the puck in the pressure areas, meeting pressure with pressure. And so now, you're going out there and seeing posts like this. Hamalytics said this isn't a Pettersson problem, it's due to poor puck management from the D. Pettersson leads Canucks forwards with 11 controlled entries, 30.66 per game, over the last 3 games, 4 more than anyone else. It's hard to enter the zone with possession when the D keeps going glass and out. And this is, of course, replying to Randeep's initial post saying that Pettersson's not pulling his weight when it comes to controlled entries, when literally, hey, guess what? He's the best guy on the team when it comes to controlled entries. Pettersson, Sasson, Miller, look at Sasson. He's out doing this compared to every other player on the team not named JT Miller and Pettersson. I mean, Sasson, maybe having him in a bigger role should be seen as something that you could look at as well, but these forwards are not necessarily doing what Rick Tocchet is saying, so maybe it's a little bit unfair to call out Elias Pettersson in this way like Randeep has. That's just the point that these posts are trying to make here. Finally, to end off this video, let's talk about the Elias Pettersson trade situation, because Rick Dhaliwal said this earlier this morning. Sources think the Vancouver Canucks were close to sending Elias Pettersson to Carolina yesterday, with Marty Necas being the centerpiece coming back. The Canucks have been after Necas dating back to last year. So, Pettersson almost got traded yesterday. Great! We saw the arguments from earlier today. Because the Canucks are having a difficult time finding suitors for JT, giving them a price that they are interested in, they might just trade Pettersson instead because it's easier to trade him and actually get value in return. Marty Necas seems to have been the piece. If you go back over on Twitter, this is what Cam Robinson said. It's my belief that the deal Vancouver and Carolina had in place for Pettersson was more expensive than the Rantanen acquisition cost, which makes sense. A younger, cost-controlled asset down the middle. Does this mean that Elias Pettersson was technically valued higher than Rantanen? Yeah, it does. And Cam's saying here, it does make sense, even though Rantanen is on pace for a 100-point year, yet again. Pettersson is on pace for a big decline from 2 seasons ago, a big decline from last year. He's in a bad spot, but he is younger, he is a center, his contract does go on for the next few years. With all these factors combined, Carolina probably said, yeah, okay, Pettersson is a little bit more valuable. And that is very, very interesting, especially when you consider what some Canucks fans' perspectives are on Pettersson right now and how bad he has been. Don't get me wrong, he has been bad, but he hasn't been as bad to the point that the Carolina Hurricanes, they still evaluated him higher than Rantanen. And for those talking about Marty Necas, well, this is what Drew Livingston went out there and said. Necas is 26 years old, and he's on pace for 92 points. He's also locked up for the next 2 years at 6.5. He isn't Rantanen, but he's not a scrub. Solid top-line player. So with that in mind, I'll leave you with this. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Elias Pettersson being placed on the third line and how he's getting talked about now by Vancouver media as to not being able to control entry the puck as much as he could have in the past, and whether or not that really is a fair criticism to be having here. It's all getting worse for Elias Pettersson, despite the fact that he might have been evaluated higher than Mikko Rantanen in a trade, and I think that's a really interesting contrast in ideas about this player from the Hurricanes' point of view as well as the Canucks media. Things are getting crazy in this town, man. We'll see what happens with Pettersson on the third line against Washington, but for now, let me know in the comments what do you think. I hope you enjoyed this Swedish Astros 9, and bye.